Let's pick up where we left off. We did John 4a last time, the first part of John, and we're going to finish up John and move into the first part of chapter 5. But first, let's recap. Okay, we're going through the book of John, and let's take a look at Jesus' journey. He starts off in Cana, all right? And Cana is in Galilee. Galilee is like it's like a county in Israel, so it includes several cities, and the Galilee territory includes several cities such as Nazareth and Cana and Capernaum and a few others. All right, so that's important to keep that in mind. That is Jesus's home county. So whenever it says he's going back to Galilee or going back to Nazareth, he's going home. Okay, so we see him in these early chapters of the book of John bouncing back and forth between his home county in Galilee and Jerusalem. So first thing we saw the big miracle in Cana. He turned water into wine. How much water? How much wine? Enough for a ton of grapes. Okay, so it was a very extravagant miracle. A lot of people heard about that. Then he goes to the Passover festival in Jerusalem, where he does miracles all over the place. It doesn't say how many, but he did a lot of miracles, including healing somebody on the Sabbath, which got him in trouble with the religious leaders because that was illegal. And so they've yelled at him already about healing on the Sabbath. So on the way back to home, on the way back to Galilee, he goes, which is up north. He stops off and starts, him and his disciples. He has the disciples do the work actually, but they're baptizing people. And this isn't very far from where John's folks are baptizing. And the religious leaders tried to stir up a fight between Jesus and John by comparing how many baptisms John was doing compared to how many baptisms Jesus was doing and stirring up some trouble. So Jesus says, hey, you know what? That ain't cool. We don't want to ruffle John's feathers, for one thing. We're on the same side. I want people to know we're on the same side. So he moves up north. He's on his way home again. He goes through the region of Samaria, where the Samaritans lived. Now, we talked about last time that there was significant racial tension between the Samaritans and the Jews. For one thing, the Samaritans weren't considered fully Jewish. They were the offspring of other races and Jews, especially the Assyrians, which went way back in the Old Testament. So anyway, even though, and there were some other differences between the Samaritans and the Jews. We talked about this last time. For one thing, the Samaritans did not accept all the books of the Old Testament. They only accepted the first 5. All right, whereas the regular Jews accepted all the first 5 books plus all of the minor prophets and so forth. So they had a much larger canon. Anyway, those were some big differences, and they hated one another. Then there was some bad blood. The Jews burned down several Samaritan cities in response to what they think that the Samaritans desecrated some graves and moved some bones around in some sacred, in the cemetery, something like that. And just go to the last one if you wonder. I talked about it last time. So anyway, bad blood between the Samaritans and the Jews. They hated one another. They hated one another so much that they didn't talk to each other. Okay? And if you were a Jew, seen talking to a Samaritan, then people wondered about you. Hey, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that we don't associate with those people? You are not being loyal to your people if you have anything to do with Samaritans. Okay, so it was a bad thing to be associated with Samaritans. Okay, so Jesus, when he was at that well, all right, in Samaria, and he talks to this Samaritan woman, that was a big deal. I mean, we talked about this last time. She was shocked. Wow, you, a Jewish person, is talking to me, a Samaritan? What's up with that? Now, we're going to pick up in verse 27 when after, remember, keep in mind, just to refresh your memory, the lady is very impressed with Jesus because she gets into a conversation where she says, hey, when the Messiah comes, he's going to let us know. He's going to let us know all the truth, and we won't have to guess about anything because Messiah's coming. And Jesus says to her, I who am speaking to you am he. And the Samaritan woman is like, what? Okay, this is a big deal. And what convinced her, because she perceived he was a prophet because he told her that she'd been married 5 times and the guy she was living with now is not her husband. And so she was, oh my goodness, you know things. Obviously, you're somebody special. And then he tells her that he's the Messiah. And she's like, oh my goodness, there's evidence that you are, because nobody could know those things unless there was something going on, something supernatural here, and she's ready to believe him. And so That's where we left off. Okay, so just to bring you up to snuff as to where we are at things. So if you got your Bible open, this is John chapter 4, starting in verse 27. Just then, his disciples came back. They were shocked. They couldn't believe he was talking with that kind of a woman. Now, what do we mean that kind? Are we talking about a prostitute or something? No. It's a Samaritan woman. You're talking to a Samaritan and a woman. Oh, what are you doing, dude? Okay, that's not done. And so it goes on. It says, no one said what they were all thinking, but their faces showed it. Okay, so they didn't come out and say, hey, don't you know the rules? I mean, would you grow up in a barn? How do you not know that we don't talk to Samaritans? They didn't say that, but their faces were like, all right, and they didn't bother hiding their shock. Well, a Samaritan woman saw that, okay? And then in verse 28, it says, the woman took the hint and left. I don't need this, okay? This whole Jews talking to Samaritans, apparently that doesn't apply to all Jews. So I get the hint. I don't want to hear anything. And she takes off and goes home. In her confusion, she left her water pot. Back in the village, she told the people, come see a man who knew about all the things I did, who knows me inside and out. Do you think he could be the Messiah? And they went out to see for themselves. Now, we don't know the full extent of the conversation that they had. All we can know is because there were apparently no other disciples around when Jesus had this conversation. So you have to depend on what later the woman told the disciples, if that happened, or what Jesus told the disciples. So he may have discussed more things with her. I mean, it seems like she's really over the top over just knowing about the 5 husbands and the guy she's living with. He may have said other things that revealed to her that this guy is really something special, that he's a prophet. We don't know that. But anyway, she's so excited about it, she has to go tell everybody, and she's saying, could this be the Messiah? Now think about this. The Jews were ready for the Messiah. We were talking around 30 AD. Many Jews were expecting the Messiah to show up at any time. And the reason is, if you go back to Daniel, in the book of Daniel, it is described about when the Messiah is going to come. It literally says, after such and such a time, you can expect the Messiah, starting from the rebuilding of the temple. And so if you do the math, it comes right around to when Jesus showed up, right in that area. So there were a number of Jews who were expecting the Messiah. What's interesting is that the Samaritans don't accept the book of Daniel as scripture, okay? So somebody had come along and let her know that it was time. She might not have known that that prophecy came from the book of Daniel, but apparently people were talking, and she was influenced, and she herself was looking forward to the Messiah coming. And so Jesus was, there he was, and she's already excited about the coming of Messiah any day now. And so she's going back to town saying, hey, guess what? We've heard that the Messiah might be showing up from some source. I think I found the guy. All right. And so they go out to see for themselves. In the meantime, the disciples pressed him, Rabbi, eat. Aren't you going to eat? Now think about it. Where were the disciples before all this happened? They went into town to buy food for lunch, okay? So they're in there, off at Myers, shopping around, getting some groceries, buying things they think he's going to like, stopping off at McDonald's on the way back, whatever. They're getting him lunch. And they come back and they say, hey, look what we brought you. They're pretty excited about it. And what does he say? He told them, I have food to eat you know nothing about. And the disciples were puzzled. All right, who brought him food? Who brought him food? There's nobody here. We're in the middle of nowhere. The disciples were puzzled. Who could have brought him food? Jesus said, the food that keeps me going is that I do the will of the one who sent me, finishing the work he started. As you look around right now, wouldn't you say that in 4 months it will be time to harvest? Well, I'm telling you to open your eyes and take a good look at what's right in front of you. These Samaritan fields are ripe. It's harvest time. So what he's saying is not that I'm not hungry because I've eaten food already. He is really, really excited about the response of the Samaritan woman. He's very impressed by it. Okay, he's very impressed by it. It's like, this woman this is amazing. Okay, this is very exciting. And then she goes and brings all these other people out, and this is just I didn't have to do hardly anything. When you think about it, he had all these miracles with the water and the wine and healing people and everything. He didn't do any of those extravagant miracles. He just told her something about herself, and she's all, wow, Messiah, I think you're the guy, and I'm going to let everybody else in on it too. And so with these other Samaritans that came along, eventually many of them believed after meeting him. And so Jesus he's not using his supernatural ability to be, he could be omniscient if he wanted, because he's God. The book of Philippians says that Jesus, while he was here, gave up his power as God and decided to only depend on the Father. Just like as Christians, he doesn't want us to depend wholly on ourselves. He wants us to depend on him, to do things by his strength rather than just depending on ourselves. And so he was the first example of that. He could have done everything on his own. He didn't need to consult the Father, but he chose to on a regular basis. And so he's walking around blind. He can't predict, or he's not able to at this time, or chooses not to use that power to read the future and figure out who's going to do what. And so he was genuinely impressed. He was surprised and impressed at the faith of these Samaritans. Okay? And so he's like, this is really fulfilling for me. I am so excited. I lost my appetite. That's what he's telling them. Okay? It's harvest time. These Samaritans are ready to go. And he goes on, the harvester isn't waiting. He's taking his pay, gathering in his grain that's ripe for eternal life. Now the sower is arm in arm with the harvester, triumphant. That's the truth of the saying. This one sows and that one harvests. Sent you to a harvest field you never worked. Without lifting a finger, you have walked in on a field worked long and hard by others. So what does he mean by this? Saying is that it never would have been that easy to convert these Samaritans unless somebody else had come along and prepared their hearts. They were ready for the Messiah. They were waiting for the Messiah only because somebody else came along and prepared them. And so they've been thinking about this. And we come along and tell them the truth, and they convert. They believe because of the work that others have done. So somebody else sowed, and we're in a great position here to reap the harvest. And now the people that sowed the seeds and let them in on the idea that it's time for the Messiah, they're going to get some of the credit for these people's transformation. We get to reap, but somebody else sowed. We're the harvester, they're the sower, but we have the same goal. We want to bring people to God. Okay. Verse 39, many of the Samaritans from that village committed themselves to him because of the woman's witness. He knew all about the things I did. He knows me inside and out. They asked him to stay on, so Jesus stayed 2 days. A lot more people entrusted their lives to him when they heard what he had to say. They said to the woman, we're no longer taking this on your say-so. We've heard it for ourselves and know it for sure. He's the Savior of the world. Okay? Now, think again. Does it say that he raised anybody from the dead? No. Does it say that he made them some beer or wine out of nut water or healed anybody? No. They heard about the woman and what he knew about her, and then they just listened to him talk. That's it. And I have to imagine, in listening to him, some people saying, you know what? This is some amazing insight and wisdom for a 30-year-old. No 30-year-old man has this kind of depth. And if you take into consideration this miracle as well, then that's a big deal. This guy is very likely the Messiah. I mean, they believed it. And so, again, Jesus is pretty excited about it. And I want you to keep that in mind because Jesus, in his mind, I believe, based on what we're going to read in the future here, is contrasting how easy it was to convert these people, how easy it was to get these people to believe compared to the Jews. Okay? Verse 43. At the end of the 2 days' stay, Jesus went into Galilee. Now remember, that's where he was headed all along. He's going back home to his home county, which is Galilee, maybe going back to Nazareth, all right? So stayed there for 2 days, and now he's continued his trek up north back into Galilee. And the disciples remember that prior to this, he had said previously that a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own country. So he has this idea based on experience, I'm sure, that it's going to be very difficult to convince people that I've grown up with, who know my family. These are going to be the most difficult people to convince that I am something special, that I'm a prophet. Okay? And so maybe because they are going to take that extra care, maybe that's why he did his first major miracle in Galilee. Okay, who knows? Perhaps. So anyway, John is remembering, he said that a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own country. Verse 45, the Galileans welcomed him, for they had been in Jerusalem at the Passover celebration and had seen all his miraculous signs. So these are people that have not just heard about the water to wine incident in Cana. These are people that also, as Jews, they went to Jerusalem for Passover, and they saw miracles. They saw him healing people right and left. Remember, he got in trouble for healing on the Sabbath? He was healing a great deal, as we saw back in chapter 4. He was healing a lot of people there in Jerusalem. And so these people from Galilee had been witness to that. They'd seen all of these amazing miracles of healing. In the course of his journey through Galilee, he arrived at the town of Cana, where he had turned the water into wine. There was a government official in the city of Capernaum whose son was very sick. When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea and was traveling in Galilee, he went over to Cana. He found Jesus, begged him to come to Capernaum with him to heal his son, who was about to die. All right, so we got this official, and he heard about Jesus. He's also from the Galilee. He's from Capernaum, and he went over there and said, man, I've heard about this guy. I heard about the water to wine, probably heard about everything he did in Jerusalem, and I want him to come heal my son. Now, this is the Weiss version of that passage. He came then again into Cana of Galilee, where he made the water wine. And there was a certain one, a king's courtier, whose son was sick with a chronic ailment in Capernaum. Now, this is interesting. I wanted to bring this up for a number of reasons. Okay, first of all, what is a courtier? Courtier, basically, some were noble, but not all. These are basically government workers. They included clergy, soldiers, clerks, secretary, agents, and middlemen with business at court. Okay, and so these are essentially people that help the government run more smoothly. He was a local official. He was a Capernaum official, so kind of like he worked for like the mayor's office, if you will. And what else is interesting that we see in the Weiss translation here is that the kid was sick with a chronic illness. Now, up until recently, were there cures for chronic illnesses? No. This is a relatively recent thing in medicine. Back in the day, if you go back even a few hundred years, if you had a chronic illness, that was just too bad. You had to either it killed you or you died from something else before it got you. But a chronic illness was a chronic illness. Many chronic illnesses don't go away. That's why they call them chronic illnesses. So I'm not going to guess at what the kid had. It could have been any number of things. It did involve fever. So one possibility is malaria. That's the first thing that popped into my mind. Doesn't have to be that, though. Okay, could have been chronic leukemia or something along that. I mean, I don't know. But bottom line is the kid was in bad shape. Weiss translation, this one, having heard that Jesus had come from Judea into Galilee, went off at once to him and commenced begging him to come down at once and heal his son, for he was about to die. Then Jesus said to him, unless you see attesting miracles and miracles that excite wonder, you will positively not believe. And if I first saw that, I'm going, okay, he said to the guy this, and I wondered, did he mean to say it to the official, or was he making a statement to the crowd in general and just, speaking at the guy, but meaning it to apply to somebody who was following him, one of his followers or one of the many people in the crowd that was around him at the time. It's not clear, but think about what he's saying. It's something that one would say out of exasperation, like, unless you see attesting miracles and miracles that excite wonder, you will positively not believe. Okay? Now, it's this poor guy. I mean, obviously the man had some faith. He traveled from Capernaum all the way to Cana, where Jesus was. So clearly the guy had some faith. So what is up? What's going on here? Wait, now I'm gonna just give you my opinion on this, okay? Just to help you in your mind, help it make a little more sense. All right. So I want to ask yourself the question, first of all, what did Jesus want people to believe about him? What did he want them to believe? Did he want them to believe that he was a healer? Okay. That's kind of stupid. That really is. I don't think so. That's like a flasher, exposing himself to somebody and saying, "Believe that I am a man." Okay? When you open up your coat and all your junk is hanging out there, it doesn't take much faith to believe that you're a man. So, duh. And that's when people, if you ask yourself the question, what did Jesus want people to believe about him? A healer or a miracle worker? Well, everybody believed that. Even his enemies believed that. Even if you look at Jewish records where they talk about Jesus, they believe that nobody questioned his miracles. They questioned the source. He was from the devil. That was their opinion. Yes, he's doing miracles, but there are miracles by the power of Satan, okay? So everybody believed that he was a miracle worker and that he was a healer. That's not what he wanted people to have faith in. That's not his message. That's not what he wanted people to believe. So imagine this guy begging Jesus, saying, "Please come heal my son David. He has cystic fibrosis from birth." So chronic illness. Now I'm just saying here, I'm not saying it was cystic fibrosis. I'm just picking out a chronic illness that's uncurable, okay? So imagine, now a couple things. One, the man himself was saying to himself, "You know what? I've heard this guy doing miracles and so forth. He might be the Messiah, but I'm not going to believe he's the Messiah unless he can heal my son." Okay? Now, for that reason, Jesus may have said, "You know what, dude? Really? After everything I've done, and you're putting me to the test? What do you think? Everybody lied about the water to wine? You think all those people in Jerusalem that saw me heal these people, you think they're all liars? I mean, what's up with that? I have to do this too?" Or somebody in his entourage was thinking or saying, "Wow, if he can heal David Levi, that kid, then even I will believe that Jesus is the Messiah. I mean, this is a chronic illness. This kid was born with this problem. Man, if he can cure that, then he may indeed be the Messiah." And so on either case, Jesus is thinking, haven't I done enough? I mean, really? You're not going to believe that I'm Messiah unless I can pull this one off. And you need to see an actual rabbit come out of a hat. After everything I've done already, it's not enough. Why would he be exasperated? He just left the Samaritans. What did it take for them to believe? How can he not compare the two? All he did was tell a lady she'd been married 5 times and the guy she was hanging out with wasn't her husband. And she was all, "You're the Messiah. Let me tell everybody about it." Okay, and then the Samaritans believed and didn't get any miracles, just talking to him. And yet, people following him and people who'd heard about all these other tremendous miracles, even with all that, they're saying, "Well, it's going to take this one. It's going to take one more really big one, cure somebody with a chronic illness, and then maybe I'll accept that you're the Messiah." And so for this reason, Jesus is saying, unless you see attesting miracles and miracles that excite wonder, you will positively not believe. There's no way you're going to, in other words, there ain't no way you're going to believe unless I really dazzle you. It's kind of, and in that, you sense he's not happy about that. Okay? He's like, really? This really, it shouldn't be that hard. The official pleaded, "Please, Lord, please come now before my little boy dies." Then Jesus told him, "Go back home. Your son will live." And the man believed Jesus' word and started home. While he was on his way, some of his servants met him with the news that his son was alive and well. He asked them when the boy had begun to feel better, and they replied, "Yesterday afternoon, about 1 o'clock, his fever suddenly disappeared." Then the father realized it was the same time that Jesus had told him, "Your son will live." And the officer and his entire household believed in Jesus. This was Jesus' second miraculous sign in Galilee after coming from Judea. So it worked. I mean, the guy got the miracle, and his whole family believed after that. So, again, not sure if when Jesus made that comment, he was specifically referring to the official or to somebody in his entourage. But regardless, he expressed his exacerbation that it required so much stuff, so many miracles to get the Jews to believe that he was Messiah. Okay, it's just, how much is enough? If he cured 50 people and turned the water to wine, you'd think that it would be easier to put two and two together. And he marveled that it took more than that. It's taking grander and more outlandish miracles to get people's attention. Anyway, afterward, Jesus returned to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish holy days. Now, keep in mind, he's going back and forth between Galilee, his home county, and Jerusalem. We don't know how long he spent in Galilee before this festival or this Jewish holy day picked up. He could have been there for months. Now, in the meantime, what was he doing? All right? Was he walking around doing ministry things, healing people, or did he go back to work and have his disciples help him in the carpenter business? All right, we don't know that, and so there's a big blank spot between here and there. But anyway, regardless, the next time John comments on what Jesus was doing was when there was another festival in Jerusalem, and so Jesus and disciples go from Galilee again back to Jerusalem. So off they go. Inside the city, near the sheep gate, was a pool of Bethsaida with 5 covered porches. So it's described, and it says about where it was. Now, what's interesting is this particular pool is described as a healing pool. And what that means is that people would hang around with ailments, with horrible physical ailments, with sicknesses, would hang around that pool. And when the water was disturbed, the tradition was whoever got into the pool first would be healed. The idea was that there was an angel that was causing this disturbance in the water. And if you jumped in the water, first one in gets healed. Okay? Now, how well it worked, we have no idea. And many so-called biblical scholars, especially exclusively the liberal scholars, doubted that pool actually existed. They doubt everything in the Bible, especially anything miraculous. And very often the Jews are accused of not coming up with any original ideas, but stealing their stories from other religions and other cultures. And this was one that they stole that from Samaria or Babylonia, or not Samaria, but from Babylonia or from Egypt or something. And so they didn't believe that the sheep gate, but that the pool of Bethsaida ever actually existed. And it was questioned all the way up until the 1990s. And in the 1990s, guess what? It was excavated, and they found it exactly where John said it would be, and it was described with the 5 columns, just like described in the book of John. This is the next slide. I'm going to show you a picture of it, but this is from Pinterest, and here's the description. Apostle John provides the details of the pool of Bethsaida, a place where people would go for healing. Recently, the pool of Bethsaida was discovered. It lies around 40 feet below the ground, and there are 5 colonnaded porches, just as John describes. So this place is a real place, okay? And it was described where it was found, and the description fit John's description. So it took a long time to dig it up and prove that this was an actual place, but lo and behold, it is. Here's a picture of it right there. Now, what it was apparently designed for, based on the architecture, it would collect rainwater from the city streets, and it would be gathered into this pool here. And the water itself was used in ceremonial washings by the temple and so forth. And so they probably didn't let people just swim in it. You wonder, well, why wait until the water stirred? Why not just hang out in the water all day? The Jewish authorities probably didn't want people doing that. They didn't want their grunge in their ceremonial washing. But they did allow people to take a dip, and whoever was first in the water would get the healing. But then they were probably expected to get out of the water so their grime wouldn't contaminate it. Anyway, here's a picture of the pool right here. All right. So here's the description, starting verse 3. Crowds of sick people, blind, lame, or paralyzed, lay on porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew how long he had been ill, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" Now, it's not clear. Did Jesus ask him, "So, how long have you been there?" Or did he just know that he'd been sick for 38 years? We don't know. Did he just turn to the disciples and say, "You know what, see that guy there? He's been sick 38 years. Okay, couldn't walk for 38 years. All right, and then he walks up to the guy. So, dude, you want to get better? All right. I can't, sir, the sick man said, for I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I'm trying to get there, someone else always gets in ahead of me. All right, let's look at the Weiss version. Jesus, having seen this one lying prostrate, and knowing that for a long time he had already been in that condition, says to him, do you have a longing to become well? The man who was infirm answered him, Sir, a man I do not have, in order that whenever the waters are stirred up, he might throw me in at once into the pool. But during the time I am coming, another steps down before me. So a couple things are revealed in this exchange. One is that the guy would be, laying there next to the water, and when he would see the water stirred, he would try to crawl fast so he could get in the water. But somebody else always made it in before him. And other people, apparently he'd seen other people successfully be first because they had relatives or friends, men, because most men are strong enough to throw people. Women, as a general rule, are less likely to throw men. But anyway, it can happen. Big enough woman anyway. But so he needed somebody who cared enough about him to physically throw him into the water so he'd have a chance. And he had nobody. So he's alone. And you think, okay, he's a Jewish person. And where are his parents? Where he's 37 years, he's had this infirmity, so his parents could be gone, but no brothers or sisters, cousins, no friends. The guy has nobody, and so he's letting Jesus know, I'm completely alone. It's all on me. I'm out here by myself. So you wonder, is it because he's just so old that he's outlived all his friends and relatives? That's a possibility. Another thing is that he may have a condition that is related to being unclean, and he may be ostracized because people know that a certain sin led to his condition. For example, syphilis. Syphilis untreated, and there was no treatment back in those days, sometimes, not infrequently, could turn into neurosyphilis. And with neurosyphilis, the spirochete, the organism that is part of syphilis, the organism will burrow into your brain or into the spinal cord, which can result in paralysis. So if it was syphilis and everybody knew, hey, you can't walk because of your VD, that might not make you very popular among a lot of pious Jews. So for this reason, he may have been ostracized and not had friends who thought he was worthy of throwing in the water. I don't know that for sure. Okay, again, he could have just outlived everybody too. But later on, we come to some other passages that sound like maybe there was some sin that resulted in his paralysis. So let me go on. Verse 8, Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your sleeping mat and walk. Instantly the man was healed. He rolled up the mat and began walking. But this miracle happened on the Sabbath day. So the Jewish leaders objected. They said to the man who was cured, you can't work on the Sabbath. It's illegal to carry that sleeping mat. Okay? So now I submit to you that Jesus wanted people to know about this miracle. He replied, the man who healed me said to me, pick up your sleeping mat and walk. Who said such a thing as that? They demanded. The man didn't know, for Jesus had disappeared into the crowd. All right, let's go back, take a look at Weiss. Jesus says to him, be arising, snatch up your pallet and start walking and keep on walking. So you have a present tense verb. Now, don't just take a walk. Keep on. I want you to walk a lot and take your pallet with you. Now, why? Okay, he's been laying on that thing for who knows how long. Thing probably has cooties, it's dirty, it's stinky, and he doesn't need it anymore. He can walk now. So what's he doing? Walking around with his pallet under his arm. He's breaking the law, that's what he's doing, and Jesus told him to, because Jesus wants a confrontation with the Pharisees. All right, that's what I'm saying. Okay, I think that will come out as we read further. I don't know for sure, not 100%, but the fact that he told them to carry that mat when I'm sure Jesus knew that it was against the Sabbath, I'm pretty sure that he wanted to draw attention to this case. So anyway, now there was a Sabbath on that day. Therefore, the Jews kept on saying to the man who'd been healed, it's the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to pick up your pallet and carry it. And so this gives you a little bit different picture than what you saw earlier in the other translation, in the Message translation. Here it says, what people kept on saying it. So as he's walking through the city with this pallet, people said, hey, everybody's looking at him. Everybody's looking at him and going, you're a Joe. It's the Sabbath. You can't do work. You can't carry things on the Sabbath. You can only walk so far. You can't even prepare meals, dude. You can't walk around carrying that mat. That's against the law. And so he's not just getting it from one little group of Pharisees. He's getting it from all over the place. He's walking around and people are saying this to him. And he's like, the guy that healed me told me to do it. Okay, don't look at me. He answered them, he who made me well, that one said to me, snatch up your pallet and start walking and keep on walking. They asked him, who is the man who said to you, snatch up your pallet and be walking? But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a crowd being in the place. In other words, Jesus had vanished into the crowd, didn't know his name, and so the guy that healed me, he's the one that told me this. But afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and told him. Okay, now think about this. The guy didn't go searching for Jesus, because there would have been a big search. Jerusalem was a big place, and everybody in Jerusalem was there. Everyone in Israel, most Jews are there for this festival, and so there's a lot of people, and so he doesn't bother doing that. And so instead, though according to Mosaic law, if you get healed, you go show yourself to the priest in the temple. And this is what he's doing. He says, I'm going to do my job. I've been healed of a disease like this, and I need to go show myself to the priest. So he does that, and while he's there, Jesus finds him. He knows he's going to be there, and so he finds him, and he says, now you are well, so stop sinning, or something even worse may happen to you. Now, think about that. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. What does that mean? Okay. Again, what if this is neurosyphilis or some other form of venereal disease? What if his activity led to his paralysis? What if he was engaged in some type of chronic sin? Let's say the guy could have been an alcoholic, could have been habitual use of bad language, could have been messing around with prostitutes, doing something else that was immoral. But he was still doing, even though the guy was paralyzed. The idea is he's still involved in this. Okay? So Jesus didn't pick out somebody who was all perfect. He picked out somebody who was lame, in trouble, but still sinning. Okay? And that's a big deal. That's a very big deal. Jesus showed kindness to him, not because he was perfect. It wasn't because he was perfect. All right? But because the guy believed. And that was important for him. Okay? And so, but he says, stop this. Whatever that thing is that you're doing, he's not telling you to be perfect, but whatever that habitual thing was, the guy knew what it was. All right? Jesus knew what it was. Other people, the disciples, they didn't have a clue what it was. But the man knew exactly what Jesus was talking about. Jesus says, in other parts of Scripture, he says, from him who has, more is expected. The more you have, the more it's expected from you. If you've seen miracles, then God expects something from you. And if you see a big miracle, if you receive a big miracle, and your life doesn't change, you discount it and go on with business as usual, with sin as usual, then God is very upset about that. That is very displeasing. Not everybody gets a big miracle. Not everybody gets healed by God directly. And if you see something or experience something like that, then God is saying, you know what? If that doesn't get your attention and get you to alter your ways, then I'm going to have to come down on you a lot harder. And that's one reason he was so upset with the religious leaders, because they saw these miracles. And in spite of seeing things that, it's like 1 in a million. How many people on earth get to see stuff like that? There were a lot of countries back in the first century. Those people didn't get to see these miracles. But the Jews, especially those of Jerusalem, the Pharisees, and the common people, saw Jesus doing miracles on a regular basis. Astounding miracles. And yet these religious leaders failed to believe. And so he's telling this guy, all right, it's not just about you seeing a miracle. you are the miracle. All right, you get to experience something that very, very few people do. And what I expect from you is to honor it. You need to honor God and recognize that God has done you a great favor, and you owe him. And so whatever that sin was, please stop, or something worse can happen to you. I had a friend, well, actually it was the brother of a good friend of mine. Many years ago, I treated him for a heroin addiction. He had a really bad habit. Now, 10 years prior, he had an amazing experience. He was a passenger driving with a bunch of friends, and his friend's older brother was driving the vehicle, and the individual, I'll call him Jim. Jim was in the front seat, and the brother of his friend, the driver, hit a telephone pole head on. And Jim was unrestrained, had no seatbelt, and so he goes through the windshield and ended up with tremendous damage. Because what happened was, on the way out, he smashed into the dashboard, and it severed his liver and his spleen. And so he had massive internal bleeding. His parents were contacted, and they were told that he probably wouldn't survive. Well, during his hospitalization, his blood pressure dropped amazing because he lost so much blood. They had to remove his spleen and try to sew the liver back. And if any of you who've done surgery know that the liver is very difficult to stitch. It's a very friable material. It's not like muscle, okay? So you don't want lacerations of the liver, because liver is really hard to stop bleeding there. So anyway, while he's losing all this blood, his heart stops, and he has a near-death experience. He comes out of his body, goes into the tunnel, goes into the light, and meets Jesus, and has a conversation with God. It really had a big impact on him. He came back, he told his family about him. Prior to that, he was an atheist, but now he's no longer an atheist, because of this experience. Well, eventually he was a musician, a very good drummer, and he got a job with MTV in New York. And while he was working at MTV, he developed a very bad heroin habit, and it ruled his life. It really destroyed his life. And he told his sister, if I can't go longer than 2 weeks without using, and this is a terrible way to live, and if I knew that this is the way my life is going to be from now on, I would rather not be alive. I mean, that's how upset he was and disturbed by the manner of life that he was living. And a couple weeks later, he was driving his motorcycle to Detroit to buy drugs, and a bee apparently hit his visor, hit his helmet, and it shocked him so much that he jerked, and the bike went down on the freeway, and his head hit a concrete median thing there. And even though he had a helmet on, the brain damage was extensive, and he lived for about a day after that, and then he was gone. He died for sure. Now, Jim had seen something miraculous 10 years earlier, and it's like, again, it comes back. The more you've seen, the more that's expected from you. I don't know for sure. Did he die at the age of 36 because his life was not sufficiently transformed by that near-death experience? Or was that just his time? I don't know, but it brings to mind this concept that if you've seen something that demonstrates the reality of God, not everybody gets that. Not everybody gets that kind of evidence, and you are responsible for that. And in this particular case, he didn't sufficiently mature spiritually in response to this, and premature death is what happened to him. And so when Jesus tells this guy, now that you're well, so stop sinning, or something worse can happen to you. All right, this is kind of important. Please pay attention to what has just happened to you. Let it transform your life, or else. Okay? So the man went to find the Jewish leaders and told them that it was Jesus who had healed him. Okay, this is the Weiss version. After these things, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "Behold, you've become well. Do not go on sinning any longer, lest something worse happen to you." So again, this is where we see that the sinning thing that he was doing, it wasn't, don't do what you did 36 years ago. He's saying this thing that you're doing now. So he was continuing in a practice even though he wasn't able to walk. Okay? So the man went off and told the Jews that it was Jesus who made him well. And on account of this, the Jews went to persecuting Jesus because these things he was doing on the Sabbath. So that guy again. Another time, because he'd already been in trouble before for healing on the Sabbath, and here he is again, healing on the Sabbath. So these Jerusalem religious leaders, they've heard of Jesus. They've already had a run-in with him. Past the last Passover, he was in town healing people right and left, and now here he is healing this guy on the Sabbath. So he's doing the very thing that they told him to stop last time, and he's really getting under. He's really ruffling their feathers, because not only is he healing people on the Sabbath, he's telling them to do work on the Sabbath. So this guy's violating too because of Jesus. So this is a real bad lawbreaker here. It's like robbing a bank, working on the Sabbath. How terrible. So Jewish religious leaders began harassing Jesus for breaking the Sabbath rules. But Jesus replied, "My Father never stops working, so why should I?" All right. In this next discourse, I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to summarize what Jesus is going to be communicating to the religious leaders. Oftentimes when we're around one group of people, we come off one way, and with another group differently. Like we treat our bosses and supervisors differently than we treat our peers or the people under us. You'd think that Jesus would want to earn the respect of the religious leaders, because the religious leaders are in charge of the people. And so if he can convince them, then maybe more people will believe, thinking in a worldly sense, all right? But Jesus does not kowtow to anybody. And this is a very good example. He does not mince words. It's not like he told his disciples in private, guess what? I'm the Messiah, I'm the Son of God, and all this stuff, just to disciples, but gave a slightly different message to the religious leaders. On the contrary, in this next discourse, I'm going to tell you, he's going to tell the religious leaders, guess what? Not only am I the unique Son of God, I can do anything God can do. I can do anything God can do. And guess what? The one you call God the Father there, he's not going to judge anybody. I am. The Father doesn't judge people. I'm going to be the one that judges every single person, me. Anything God can do, I can do. I and God, we're one. I and the Father are one. This is what he's going to communicate. So I want you to keep that in mind as I go through the verses here, okay? So the first thing he says is that my Father never stops working, so why should I? He's referring to the Sabbath, going, the people under the Mosaic law weren't allowed to do any work on the Sabbath. But he's saying, hey, did God, there was that Sabbath, the Sabbath rest when God created the universe. But is he doing a Sabbath now? No. Does God honor the Sabbath? Did the sun come up today? Yeah, okay. Are you still breathing? Are atoms still held together? Then, hey, God is still doing stuff. All right? He doesn't take a break. He doesn't honor the Sabbath. And I don't have to honor the Sabbath either. All right? So that's the first thing he's saying. Father keeps working, and so do I. So the Jewish religious leaders tried all the more to kill him. In addition to disobeying the Sabbath rules, he had spoken of God as his Father, thereby making himself equal with God. So by trying to kill him, were they pulling out their guns? Were they hitting him with stones, clubbing him? No. They're trying to talk folks into killing him. So they're trying to talk the crowd maybe into stoning him, or talking among themselves, saying, isn't this enough? How much do we need to execute this guy? Come on. And so that's probably what we're talking about. It's that they are stirring up conversation on why we need to kill this guy. He's making himself equal with God. That's overt blasphemy. But he answered them, this is the Weiss version. He answered them, my Father keeps on working until now, and as for myself, I also am continually working. I'm not taking a break. 7 days a week, I'm doing my thing. On this account, therefore, the Jews kept on seeking him to kill him off, not only because he was continually breaking the Sabbath, but also because he was saying that God was his privately owned, unique Father, a Father in a way in which no one else had him for a Father, making himself equal with the deity. So they didn't have any any idea that Jesus was saying, well, I am a child of God just like everybody else. We're all children of God. We're all children of God. No. They recognize that, just looking at the context here, they recognize immediately he's saying that I am the Son of God. And as whatever God can do, I can do. That is not somebody who believes they're a child of God says. Nobody else talks like that, okay? Jesus replied, I assure you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He does only what he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. Okay? So if you question me, Jesus never said he could do everything God can do. What does it say right here? Whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and tells him everything he is doing. And the Son will do far greater things than healing this man. You will be astonished at what he does. So he's speaking of himself in the third person. But if anybody, people say that Jesus was humble, and we believe it. But if he were just a man, these are not the words of a humble man. Okay? He's saying that I know what God is thinking. God talks to me all the time. All right? He tells me what to do. And when God is about to do something, when the Father is about to do something, he tells me about it. I'm in unique contact with God the Father. He will even raise from the dead anyone he wants to, just as the Father does. Whoa! What? So he's telling the Pharisees, because he hasn't raised anybody from the dead yet, okay? He will eventually. But the Jerusalem Pharisees, they've not seen him raise anybody from the dead. So Jesus is telling them beforehand, stay tuned, okay? I can do anything the Father can do. For one thing, I can back up what I'm telling you because I've been healing people. All right, you know that I've been healing people. You've seen me heal people. You've seen the people after they've been healed. Okay? So, yeah, just as God heals people, I can heal people. As God can raise people from the dead, as the Father can raise people from the dead, I can raise people from the dead. Right? And the Father leaves all judgment to his Son, so that everyone will honor the Son, just as they honor the Father. But if you refuse to honor the Son, then you are certainly not honoring the Father who sent him. Now this is a whopper here. He's saying that unless you honor the Son as you honor the Father, you are not honoring the Father. Okay? Yeah, there are certain cults, Jehovah's Witnesses being one, who accept Jesus as a God or a son of God or an angel, but not as God. Okay? And the problem that I have with that theology is this verse right here. Everyone, God, the Father leaves all judgment to his Son, so that everyone will honor the Son, just as, the word is katos, the Greek word is katos, means exactly as they honor the Father. And if you refuse to honor the Son, then you are certainly not honoring the Father. So can you accept Jesus as something less than the Son of God or God? And the answer is no. When he calls himself the Son of God, he's putting himself on equal footing with God. I often describe this as, imagine the two hemispheres of the human brain. You have a right hemisphere and a left hemisphere. Now, they have many of the same functions in common. Many. With things on the right and things on the left, they control the different sides of the body. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, the left hemisphere. The left hemisphere is very specialized for language, okay? Whereas the right hemisphere for engineering skills and three-dimensional spatial reconstruction and so forth. And so they do some different things, but they have a lot in common. Now, they're connected by a centerpiece called the corpus callosum. That's a bundle of nerve fibers that make it so that the minute you become aware of something on one hemisphere, the other hemisphere is aware of it within microseconds. So boom, boom, happens over here, experienced over here. And Jesus is describing that kind of intimate contact between him and the Father. So even though you can't see the connection, there is like a Wi-Fi connection between the Father and the Son at all times, so that there is this awareness. Jesus has this constant awareness of what's going on in the mind of the Father. Okay, and so they're in cahoots. When Jesus does something, he is in cahoots with the Father at all times. Next, Weiss version. For even as the Father raises the dead and makes them alive, thus also the Son makes alive whom he desires to. For not even does the Father judge anyone, but has given the judgment wholly to the Son, in order that all may be honoring the Son, just as they are honoring the Father. He who is not honoring the Son is not honoring the Father who sent him. Okay, big time, just saying pretty much the same thing that I just described there. I assure you, those who listen to my message and believe in God who sent me have eternal life. They will never be condemned for their sins, but they have already passed from death into life. So, pointing out that, you listen to my message, if you believe what I'm telling you, you believe my message, you believe that I am who I say I am, then your sins will be forgiven. You will not be condemned for your sins. It doesn't matter what your sin is. You trust me, I will take care of it. I will die for that sin. And if you believe that I am who I claim to be, you're going to make it. I mean, it's not that difficult. Think about that thief on the cross next to him. All the guy said was, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said, I promise you, this very day you're going to be with me in paradise. The guy didn't go to church. He's never baptized. He simply had a little bit of faith, and that was all it took. Okay? All right, the Weast version. Most assuredly, I am saying to you, he who habitually hears my word and is believing the one who sent me has eternal life, and into judgment does not come, but has been permanently transferred out of the sphere of death into life. So this adds, in the Weast, we get a little bit more here, because it's not just who hears my word, like you hear it one time. It's a habitual thing. All right, to where, okay, it needs to not just be something where, that sounds pretty good. You're going to die for my sins, and therefore I can do whatever I want. I can sin any way I want and automatically get a pardon. I'm down with that, man. Yeah, I'll take it. No. What is required is this habitually hear the word. Now, how much is a habit? How many do you have to read it once a week, once a month, once a day? Look, it doesn't work like that. It needs to be some kind of habit. So with some degree of regularity, you make it a priority to read the Bible. A lot of people today, they consider themselves Christians. They said a prayer many years ago, but their value system is exactly like everybody else's. There's not much difference in their life. They have the same values that the people on TV have, that their friends have, that the people at school have, and they live like that. And there's not a lot of Bible reading going on. And the reason is not because it's difficult to understand. And today we have all these translations that make it easy to understand. It's not like back in the day when all we had was the King James Version and nobody speaks 1611 King James English anymore. The modern translations we have make it pretty easy to understand, and so that excuse is gone. So why would somebody who calls himself a Christian not bother reading the Bible? Well, the big reason is nobody wants to feel ashamed. Nobody wants to feel guilty, and people don't want to stop doing something that they have fun at, that they have fun doing, or that they enjoy doing, or that they feel they need to do. And reading the Bible, you keep reading it, and you may discover, and they suspect that they're doing something wrong. But if they read the Bible, then that means they're going to know that they're doing something wrong, and they're going to feel guilty, shamed, and maybe a little afraid. And so, consequently, just avoid that. Just, hey, I heard that I believe Jesus died for my sins. I get an automatic pass. That's good, and I'm going to go on and live my life the way I have been. That is he's warning us about that. He says, look, you need to habitually hear it and believe the one that you got to believe too. All right, you do have to believe, and there is something you have to do regarding the truth. You need to pursue the truth. You need to take a chance and make it a kind of habit. So you need to habitually hear my word. Okay. Now, what about the thief on the cross? He didn't habitually. Okay, look. He knows some people, he's going to make exceptions. There are people that don't have the opportunity, and he knows that, okay? But for those that have the opportunity, there needs to be a choice. I mean, if it is possible to make that decision at the very last moment in life and convert. I mean, it's possible. But for most people, you don't have to wait until the end, and the longer you wait, the more difficult it may be for a number of reasons. We'll talk about that some other time. Anyway, verse 25, and I assure you that the time is coming, in fact it is here, when the dead will hear my voice, the voice of the Son of God, and those who listen will live. The Father has life in himself, and he has granted his Son to have life in himself. Saying something big here. He's saying, wow, everybody is going to hear my voice. When you die, I'm the one that's going to call you back into existence. Every person, no matter what religion or country you're from, no matter whether you're male or female, no matter your status in life, no matter your race, none of that matters. Every single human is going to be brought to life. Your spirit is not going to die, and I'm going to be the one that greets you on that other side. Now, some of you folks, your enduring spirit, which cannot die, is going, and I'm going to judge you. And some of you guys are going to come and you're going to hang out with me forever. And you're going to have a great future, and it will never end. You will never have pain again. You're going to a great place that is so astounding that I can't really describe it. It's on a different level. And if you listen to people's near-death experiences, you get the idea that life over there is very different than life here in a lot of ways. But some people are not going to fare so well. They're going to go to that other place. And Jesus is saying, I'm the one that's going to decide which place you go. Most assuredly, I am saying to you, there comes an hour, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of God, and those having heard shall live. For as the Father has life in himself, so also he gave the Son to be having life in himself. I give life. And he's saying specifically, I give eternal life. I give you the ability to live forever. I give you the ability to live in heaven forever. In addition, he's saying, Father, if you look in Genesis, what did God do? He created life out of nothing. He kind of indicates, I can do that too. I can make life out of nothing, and I can bring people back from the dead. Verse 27, and he has given him authority to judge all mankind because he is the Son of Man. So why the Father hand the ability to judge all humans to the Son? Because the Son knows, because the Son is God, but he knows what it's like to be human. He's experienced all the temptations and pain and frustrations that we have. Okay? He knows what it's like to be us. We can't say, oh God, how can you condemn me? Because look what I had to go through. You've been up there in heaven with the perfect life. You've never experienced pain, and you're going to send me to hell? Look what I had to go through. And Jesus can say, you know what? I went through some pretty hellish things on earth myself. I endured that. I know what it's like to be human. I experienced it. So yeah, I think I'm qualified to judge you. Okay? And so he's saying, this is why the Father has handed all judgment to the Son. So don't be surprised. Indeed, the time is coming when all the dead in their graves will hear the voice of God's Son, and they will rise again. Those who've done good will rise to eternal life, and those who have continued in evil will rise to judgment. So here, when you use the word judgment, it's the bad judgment. If they continued on. Now again, everybody's been doing sin. Everybody's been doing evil things. We're all guilty of that. But he's saying those who continued, those who chose to continue on in that life and not turn to me, who have rejected me and continued in their old ways, they're not going to do very well. I'm going to judge them in a bad way. I am going to make that judgment. Now think about it. He's saying this is the Pharisee. Pharisees are threatening to kill him because he broke their law. And what he does is he breaks it some more, okay, by putting himself on the same level as God and having the audacity to say, guess what? Not just, I'm going to judge you, dude. I'm going to judge everybody. And whether you go to heaven or hell, that's on me. I'm going to be the one that makes that decision. So he doesn't hide that. He comes right out and throws it in their face right here. And verse 30, but I do nothing without consulting the Father. I judge as I am told. Again, that connection, that intimate connection between him and the Father, so that he doesn't make these decisions unilaterally. there's always this consensus. There's always this conferencing that's going on between the Father and Son. So if I judge you, if I send you to hell, the Father is giving his okay. I've gotten the okay. We agree on things. We are of one mind in this, okay? So it's not that, oh my goodness, the Son was been unfair and the Father didn't know anything about it. If I make a judgment on you, the Father is automatically in agreement because we don't make decisions independent of one another. As my judgment is absolutely just because it is according to the will of God who sent me. It is not merely my own. Okay? If you call God your Father, then he's given all judgment to me. And when I judge somebody as not worthy to go to heaven, it's not just me. It's me and the Father. Okay? This is we are the one God. And confuse the Jews to pieces. And this is just a picture of the brain where you have your right hemisphere and left hemisphere, and in the middle, the corpus callosum. Those are white matter tracts that intimately connect the two hemispheres together so that what is experienced on one side is instantly experienced on the other as well. And this is kind of the imagery that Jesus is presenting to the religious leaders, that me and the Father, we are one. We are in communication. And all judgment, just like in the brain, language is on the left. Jesus is like, judgment is going to be on the left. That's where I am. I am the communicator. I am the part of God that is communicating with man, and that is going to be the judge of man. But those fibers that connect me to the Father means that whatever decision I make is not unilateral. The Father is in on all of my decisions. So to go against me, to reject me, think very long and hard about that. I am the Son of God. I'm the Messiah. Anything the Father can do, I can do. We are one. I'm not saying this out of pride. I'm saying this out of fact. And that's Jesus' presentation to the Pharisees here. So you can imagine they're going to be upset about this. Now, we also come to understand, from earlier from talking about Nicodemus, that a number of the Pharisees were pretty convinced that he was who he said he was. The Pharisees weren't of one mind, but the bulk of them were essentially very much against him. And this is where, they didn't like him before, but after this confrontation, they really don't like him. Okay, you think about what he's saying. This is blasphemy on a very high level, but they're going to be very conflicted because, while this guy is speaking what appears to be blasphemy, he's backing it up with miracles. Okay? And so this is not an easy thing. It's like they can call him an evil person and a bad guy, but what about these miracles? And so this is before they start calling him demon possessed. And that's going to come later. And why do they jump to the conclusion that he's possessed by a demon? Because they can't explain away the miracles. How is he able to do this? If it's not God, then where does he get the power? And their conclusion was, he gets the power because of the prince of demons. That's why he has these miraculous powers. All right, so that's John chapter 4 and the first part of chapter 5. Very important. There's a lot. I think it really helps to be familiar with this particular chapter because when it comes to the subject of the deity of Christ, this is one of the richest chapters in the New Testament, I think. There's many, many more, but here, anybody that wants to say that in the Bible, Jesus never claimed to be God, read this chapter several times, and it's very hard to conclude anything other than that. Now, one question that comes up is that, John was written so much later. It was added. The form critics would say that John was written so much later that it certainly wasn't written by the Apostle John. It was written hundreds of years later, and it was based on legend that had built up. Jesus was never claimed to be God. This was attributed as a legend 200, 300, 400 years after the fact. Well, that was before we had manuscripts from the book of John that date way, way, way back. So, what is the oldest manuscript of the New Testament? What's the oldest manuscript? It's the John Rylands manuscript, and it's a portion of the book of John. It dates to between 120 and 130 AD. Okay? So, think about that. There was no time for legend to build up. Okay, this is a fragment that we have in our hands today that goes back to around 120 to 130 AD. Now, John wasn't alive in 120 to 130 AD, but people that knew John personally were alive at that time. People that knew people that had seen Jesus working these miracles and saying these things were still alive. It would be like me trying to make up a legend about John F. Kennedy. It wouldn't fly because there are a lot of people who had parents that knew John F. Kennedy, and a lot of people that know people who were alive at that time. I myself was alive at that time. Even if you tried to make up something about Lincoln, okay, that wasn't that long ago. There are so many people that know the literature from around that time even, and know a lot about Lincoln. If you try to say, well, really, Lincoln was Arabic. He was actually, from Saudi Arabia. And he was a sultan, and he didn't have one of those stovepipe hats. He wore a turban. Okay, that wouldn't go very far. For one thing, we have like paintings and pictures and things like that. You can say they were doctored, but you have to come up with some crazy conspiracy that's so wild nobody would believe it. Same deal. The fact that we have manuscripts that date to so close to the time of the events that precludes the idea that this could be a legend. There was no time for a legend to build up. No time. Okay? No time. And so these claims of Jesus, claiming to be God, to be the judge of mankind, they can't be ignored. Either the apostles got together and decided to make up this preposterous lie, and they agreed upon it. They could have done that, but again, with manuscripts dating so early, you're within the lifetimes of people that knew people that were alive when these events took place. And so how could they have pulled that off? How could they have pulled that off? Again, it's very difficult. Now, if the earliest manuscripts of the New Testament were 500 years after the fact, then you can go to the idea that it might have been that maybe this was a legend that built up, because 500 years after the fact, nobody is still alive that knew anybody that knew John. But we don't have this big 500-year gap. We have only a few years, and that is not enough time to support a legend. There were too many times who could refute all of the historical things that John was talking about. Too many people that could refute it. They're still alive. They're still walking around. Therefore, we have to take it seriously. Okay? So hopefully hopefully this was worth it, and this will shine some light on John 4b 5a. Okay? So thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll be around to hear the rest.